All right. Welcome to Gab and Jam, episode 248.
248. And what are we talking about today?
All right, so today is one of those, I don't know, it's one of those maybe artist nitpicking things, but it's kind of fascinating to us. It is the difference between style and voice.
Okay. So what are we talking? Let's kind of develop, because people can feel like that they're the same thing.
Right. And so that's one of the reasons why it was of interest is that I think most people use them pretty interchangeably.
Right.
And so I was listening to an Art Juice podcast, and I don't even remember the episode because it was just such a small portion of their conversation, but they started talking about that there is a difference. And so we started talking about the idea that style is more, I guess, related to genre.
Right. Okay. So style is more of the type of music.
Right.
Or the genre of music that you might do. So there might be a style of music such as, hip hop or whatever, or rock, whatever it might be. And so you, as an artist, you do that particular style or genre of music.
Right. Okay. However, your voice, as an artist, you may vary your style through your artist journey.
So let's take two hip hop artists. Let's take Nas and Jay-Z, right? Okay. So Nas and Jay-Z are both hip hop artists, but they both have very different voices. Mm-hmm. I think most people would see them as being great MCs or Kendrick Lamar, right? Mm-hmm. So you got Kendrick Lamar or Drake, right? So you got Drake, you got Kendrick Lamar, you got Nas, you got Jay-Z, who are all great MCs, but completely different voices.
Right.
And, and have fans that will probably say either one or the other. Mm-hmm. Is like the greatest MC of all time.
Right. And so we kind of touched on that a little bit when we did the episode, and I'll put it in the description below, but artists that are genres unto themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we were talking about. Like we mentioned Prince and how it does not matter what style of music or what genre he did. Yeah. You always heard his voice, which was something that was unique. And that kind of traveled as he traveled throughout the styles.
Right. Yeah. And then after a while, it's like everything start being, I guess, less identifiable as a particular genre. Mm-hmm. So, so Prince would do a song like When Doves Cry. Mm-hmm. And so it has elements of R&B, it has elements of rock, it's definitely, it has elements of electronic, because you got this drum machine that's just kind of leading everything. Yeah. So it just kind of goes all over the place. It fell in the vein or genre of pop music, but I almost don't see pop music as a genre,
right?
At least to me. Now, other people might say it is, but it's ever changing.
That's the same way it is with indie. We kind of had that conversation, right? Yeah. It is that really is not a genre.
It's a description. Right. You know what I'm saying? So pop music to me is what is popular at the time. So now pop music is arguably hip hop because hip hop is like the most popular genre of music that's out there. Yeah. So I mean, it's really like pop music is kind of like hip hop. Whereas where I think we make mistakes with these genres and make them limiting is the genre could start to evolve and change. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what it may encompass may be broader. So,
and we talked about that a little bit on Is Funk Dead and Is Rock Dead?
Right, yeah.
Where people are saying just because it's not the way it was
before. Right. Because the Beatles were a rock band, but Eleanor Rigby is not where they were when I did I Want to Hold Your Hand. Right. Yeah. But we look at both as rock songs. Yeah. And rock radio played both songs as rock songs because they came from the Beatles. Yeah.
And then they're also pop because they hit pop at the top of the charts.
Right. They were also pop songs. But we have to think about these other genres of what is popular music and say that there has to be a certain amount of ability for it to expand. I mean, and again, I'm not just making this stuff up. It's like jazz started out as ragtime, right? Yes. And all the rest of that kind of stuff, right? it evolved
Yeah.
to be swing music.
Yeah.
And once it became swing, it didn't stop being jazz.
Right. And then it went to the dissonant.
Right. Or when it went to bebop.
Bebop,
went to bebop. Then it went to kind of like that cool type of thing that Miles Davis is doing, right? Then it went to kind of like that dissonant thing.
Yeah.
And then we went to, and it's probably stuff that was happening simultaneously. So then you got to the jazz fusion era, where you start bringing in these electronic instruments that had the dissonance, had the rest of this kind of stuff. And then you got to, what people would call elevator music, which kind of got to the smooth jazz age, right?
Yeah.
And then people start, the Wynton Marsalis's of the world start pushing back, saying, "Oh, this is no longer jazz music."
Right.
But I look at it and say, it's all jazz music.
Right. And if you go back in the history of the jazz genre,
right,
there were people all along that, as the new versions came out, would dismiss it as not being jazz.
It's not being jazz, right. I mean, there were people who, when the swing era was being replaced by bebop, they were like, "What is this?
Right.
It's not jazz." I mean, come on. I mean, but it all is. It's like music evolves.
Yeah.
And you're probably seeing that with country, because country is starting to evolve to kind of take on, other
especially
styles
hip-hop.
of music,
Oh
right?
my goodness.
Starting to take on hip hop and that kind of stuff, and that goes to the appropriation thing, right?
So check out our last episode.
Right,
if you did
appropriation, right?
Appropriation versus appreciation, where's the line?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm bringing this all back around to say that it is possible for an artist within a style or a genre to have their own sound. And we've seen that. And sometimes the artists outgrow the genre.
Right.
The voice of the artist becomes too big to be held back by the genre.
Yeah.
Such we get people like Prince or Michael Jackson who after a while they just, Lenny Kravitz may fall in that too, who just start to
or Isley Brothers. We kind of talked about that.
Who can go beyond. But I think the Isley Brothers stayed safely within the realm of R&B. Whereas, but what I'm saying,
you said because their R&B eyes like the Hotel California, that kind of thing, right?
No, those type songs. I'm saying that their core black audience never left them, or never got to a point where they couldn't relate.
Okay.
Whereas I'm saying that Prince did things.
Okay.
That core black audience would be like,
I'm not sure about that.
Right. What I mean? It's like that's kind of and it just clearly went
moving a line
beyond that. Whereas, and I'm not saying that the Isley Brothers, R&B, I mean, they made these songs more soulful, but some of them still kind of had their rock elements. And I'm saying the Isley Brothers were alchemists, so they were combining other things with R&B music, but I don't think they quite went beyond the genre to the point where, Prince did. Prince just... he pushed it so much, with things like Dirty Mind. Yeah. That, and he pushed it so early.
Yeah.
I think that was kind of part of it. I mean, that was Prince's third album after he finally had his first #1 R&B hit, I Want to Be a Lover.
Yeah.
And that's not what you normally do.
No.
You follow that up with more of the same.
Yeah.
And he followed it up with something completely out of left field. That had it where he was going on the, on tour with the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
And, and even though, Stevie Wonder didn't necessarily lose his R&B audience, I think he did push his R&B audience.
Okay.
So I think he got bigger than the genre too. So meaning that with, things like Superstition and some of the things that he was doing with electronic music, and bringing in rock elements
too. Yeah.
Right. He was pushing that. And so I think he kind of expanded himself outside of that too, where he just broke free of that. And Stevie Wonder has kind of become a genre within himself. You know what I mean? It's like Stevie does what Stevie does.
Right.
And so regardless of how he does it, it's just that.
And so I think it's important because as DIY rock stars, we're always trying to figure out how to describe, because part of our job is to frame how people see us so that we can do the art that speaks to us and not necessarily get put into some type of box. And so I guess that is where that comes in, because people will ask, well, what style of music do you do? And that is, to me, a loaded question.
Well, that's the paradox. So this is the part that's we were talking about this too, and that because you got the art versus commerce thing. So, a lot of times as artists, we look at, genres as being restrictive, as, kind of handcuffing us and things like that. However, genres are very good marketing tools.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a good way to kind of go out, find audiences and things like that.
Can piggyback on someone else's if it's a genre that is similar to what you do. Yeah.
Right. It takes something very impractical like music, entertainment, and makes it very practical for people and allows you to effectively market things, and so yeah, I mean, that's a tough thing, because if you are an artist and your voice is one that can't really be held to a genre, you might make it a little bit more difficult to find your market.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the downside.
Yeah.
The upside of being able to find your voice within a genre is that you may find it a lot easier to find an audience. If you can't find your voice within a genre, you're probably going to struggle a lot more to find an audience.
Right, because the people who liked one product may not follow you to the next.
It is helpful if you can say, hey, if you like, this MC, this MC, this MC, you might like me.
Yeah.
If you like, this artist, you might like me.
Yeah.
Because I kind of align with these artists.
Yeah.
And that's helpful to be able to do that. And to the extent that you can't do it, then that becomes a lot more difficult, because so who do you sell to?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I mean, it is music business.
Yeah.
And so
we keep saying it, and it's DIY Rockstars. I don't want to concern myself with that. At the heart, my heart of hearts. However, in order to move along, the creative empire, you have to be concerned with the business elements, because
you have to.
That is the way you get people drawn into your actual art. Right. Is to be able to market it and sell it.
If that's what you want to do, and you want to be something more than a hobbyist, then now you're talking about the whole marketing aspect. You got to start looking at your music that way. You got to start discerning it a little bit differently. You gotta start thinking along these lines, because if you're not, and you're just tossing it out there, just saying, "Hey, it's gonna happen," you're dreaming. It's just a wish. And more than likely, it's just not gonna just picks up and it just finds a way, and how it is, art and true talent.
Doesn't
happen.
It'd be the tree falling in the forest, unfortunately.
It is. I mean, that's what happens. I mean, there's been some great records that we've listened to over the years that didn't get promotion, didn't get kind of what we thought maybe it would get from record companies, and just faded away.
They were major artists, or emerging artists where they had major deals.
Right. Or like some people, like Amp Fiddler, I think, had a deal with Elektra back in the 90s.
Yeah.
And I don't think people know about that record.
No.
I mean, Marcus Miller had, he was doing R&B
kind
of stuff.
He used to sing.
Yeah, right. That Jamaica Boys or something like that. They were doing these records back in the 80s, and they had the whole 80s hookup and all the rest of that kind of stuff, but I mean, he really kind of found his voice when he, became more or less a jazz artist, and kind of based around his bass guitar. And he had a certain voice to that.
Yeah.
And that voice is not everything that he does.
Right.
It's an aspect of what he does.
Yes.
But it's still him. It's not, and then over time, it has started to take on more of and take on more of his universe as he's been allowed to expand as an artist. So, after a while, he's starting to grow out of, at least I don't look at him. There are certain guys that I kind of see as kind of like, okay, they're going to do the whole bass player thing.
Yeah.
I don't see Marcus Miller as that guy.
Mm-hmm.
I see him as a guy who writes very good songs. Does very good production.
Yeah.
He just happens to feature the bass.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way that I see him.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit different than some of these other bass playing guys. And it's mainly because he comes from that. So kind of going back to your point again. that is the big part of finding your voice. So
Yeah.
the good thing is for the DIY rock star is that I do think it's important to find the genre that most closely fits you. Even
Right.
if you are genre hopping, right? You are influenced by something.
Yeah.
There is somebody out there who, or there are artists out there who influenced you.
Yes.
You know, tap into that.
Yeah.
You know, maybe for your first project or two, you know, align yourself with those songs that more or less align with a specific type of genre.
Yeah.
You know, and then you start to expand on top of that,
Yeah.
you know. But I think that's the first thing.
Yeah.
And as long as you kind of have your twist.
Yes.
And a lot of times, if you're being true to yourself,
Mhm.
you'll find that
Mhm.
twist that you need to have.
Yeah.
And then after that, you can see things kind of expand.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so.
I love it. All right, what do you guys think? What are your thoughts on this topic? Have you defined your musical voice? And then, even if so, what genre do you do? Drop it in the comments below. What else?
Yes, indeedy. So we still doing Sugar Fit. Speaking of genres, this is kind of squarely in the funk milieu.
Yes.
And so any place that you stream, you could stream Sugar Fit.
That's
and
right.
You got the
ringtones. There are ringtones for every song on Sugar Fit, so that when your phone rings, you know the difference between yours and every other phone in the place.
Yeah.
If you dig the vibe and you want to be a part of the tribe, be sure to
subscribe.
We're wishing you love, peace, and
chicken grease.